Alright, today guys we're going to get really geeky about the local election results, and we're going to get onto a map prediction later. Now there's one thing I would like to majorly stress before we get into the detail of this video. That is that they show the results of a local election. Not everybody votes in a local election, and not everybody would have voted on Brexit issues. There have been some people that voted on, say, Greenbelt land or council tax, or say potholes in the road, issues such as that, which will play into this result. It's not purely a Brexit result. However, we are in what most people describe as a political crisis, and that's why many have interpreted this as a reflection on the way the government is handling Brexit. Secondly, I'd stress not everybody turns out to local elections. The first reason being that local elections matter, you could argue, somewhat less than general elections because they don't put in power the people of government, but the people of local government. The second reason people don't turn up is because they're disillusioned with the government and they want to register their protest to not vote in the elections as a registration of their anger with the political process in general. The third reason why people might not vote in elections, in local elections in particular, is because there is no candidate that they feel represents them. As with any election, there is only a limited set number of candidates per seat, and not every option that you see in the analytics countrywide plays out in their particular seat locally. For example, there might not have been a UKIP candidate, or there might not have been a Liberal Democrat candidate in their particular seat. And another thing to stress and point out is that these local elections only occurred in rural areas of England. They did not occur in London, they did not occur in Scotland, they did not occur in Wales. I'm not going to talk about the Northern Irish result today, I'm only going to talk about the English result. Therefore, most of the seats being contested were already Tory seats, and that is reflected in the results. So the Tories won the most number of councillors, winning 3,562. Labour won the second most number, winning 2,023. Other parties, such as Independents, the Reliance Party, won 1,179. I'd also stress Change UK and the Brexit Party did not participate in these local elections. The Liberal Democrats won the third most number of seats, winning 1,350 councillors, and then the Greens with 265, and then finally UKIP with 31. Now UKIP did not put forward as many number of councillors as they did in 2015 because many UKIP candidates have defected to become independent candidates, and therefore they'll fill out this grey column or independent column, as I'll show later, and therefore it seems like UKIP have lost seats. But does it mean that most voters have turned away from Brexit and in favour of remaining? Well, we'll get onto that in a minute. But what's most interesting is the seat changes, which show that the two main parties have lost out. The Conservatives losing the most seats, losing 1,334 seats. UKIP losing 145 seats, Labour losing 82 seats, with the Liberal Democrats gaining 703, the Greens gaining 194, and others gaining 662. What does this mean? Well, when people walk into a booth in local elections, they generally are voting for something and against something else. Now, you could argue that the majority of voters voted in favour of Liberal Democrat policies, the most prominent of which is the second referendum. Like I said earlier, when voters go into a booth, there is only a set limited number of options on that ballot paper, and there might not necessarily be a UKIP candidate on that ballot paper, or they might not know the independent candidates on their ballot paper, and therefore they're reluctant to vote for the independent candidate and would prefer to vote for an established party. So you could also argue that this rise towards the Liberal Democrat vote and indeed the Green vote, which are offering more or less a similar thing with regards to Brexit, is actually a vote against the two main political parties in this election, and that there was no particular Brexit party on offer, apart from UKIP, which, as I said, didn't necessarily contest every seat, and independent candidates who voters had to be very involved in the election to know what their particular policies on Brexit were. So it could just be that they voted against the Conservatives and Labour in favour of a party that they recognise, and that Remainers happen to gravitate towards Remainer parties like the Liberal Democrats and Greens. People who didn't know who to vote for happened to gravitate to parties that they knew, like the Liberal Democrats and Greens, that weren't the Conservatives or Labour, and therefore the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party gained both recognition and anti-Brexit bias. The other reason why the Greens might have gained a little bit is because of the recent news regarding building on Greenbelt land. Extinction Rebellion have become very popular at the moment, and climate change is a very popular trending topic, almost as trending as Brexit at the moment, and so that's where the Greens can gain ground on those issues. The reason why the Independents become popular is, as I said, there isn't as many options in a local election as there is a general election, and therefore people vote against the two main parties by protesting to an independent candidate, whatever their policy may be. The reason why UKIP became unpopular is, as I said, they chose not to contest every seat because many UKIP candidates defected to become independent because they didn't want to associate with the UKIP leadership, who have, by the media, been associated with the far right. But let's talk about the two main political parties. Now, you'd expect an incumbent government to lose seats in a local election coming towards the end of their term. And we've had 9 years of Conservative government now, and we haven't had a very successful Brexit process. Theresa May is not very popular, and so that's reflected in this result. I think that's fairly obvious. As for the Labour result, you could say, well, they've only lost 82, they're not far off. They're miles off what this Conservative loss is, yes, but you could also argue that they are the opposition party and they are failing to gain seats against the incumbent government. In other words, it shows that Jeremy Corbyn is not doing enough on either Brexit or the way he's currently running the country to show that he is a credible leader that people want as the next political party. In other words, they would prefer to have the Liberal Democrats, who are more clearly offering a second referendum, than the Labour Party. For the Labour Party, they struggle on two fronts with regards to Brexit. On the one hand, they could offer the second referendum front and centre of their political party, in which they face a great deal of abandonment from Labour to parties which are more in favour of Brexit, such as UKIP, because let's not forget in 2017, voters went from UKIP to Labour and then back to Labour in 2017 in that election, which is what helped them gain a lot of seats in 2017. So if they fail to deliver Brexit, many of those voters will go back towards Brexiteer parties like UKIP or the Brexit Party. On the other hand, if they fail to deliver a second referendum, which is another part of their policy, many of the Remainer Labour supporters will defect towards, as they already have done actually, towards the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, who are more clearly front and centre putting second referendum with an option to remain as part of their policy. What it does show also is that this current withdrawal agreement that Theresa May has negotiated isn't accepted by a majority of the population, hence why this massive rejection of the Conservative Party. Now, whether that means that they therefore support the customs union deal that the Labour and the Tories are trying to negotiate more is still under question, because yes, Labour have lost less seats than the Conservatives, but let's not forget they've both lost seats. So does this mean that they should walk out of the talks with each other in favour of having a second referendum front of centre and having that option to remain in there? Or does it mean that they should continue the talks in the hope of gaining a successful Brexit, which is economically successful to gain back these Remainer voters, and is politically successful to get the benefits of leaving a customs union and a single market to gain back these UKIP Brexit party voters and independent party voters who would prefer, a clean break Brexit. I think for many voters it's a choice between one or the other, and you have to make that choice between one or the other. Otherwise you confuse voters like Labour have done, and you lose votes. You become a divided party like the Tories, like Labour, and you lose votes. Another reason why many people have suggested the Tories have lost so much is because they promised to deliver Brexit and Brexit hasn't happened yet, along with Labour, who promised to deliver Brexit and Brexit hasn't happened yet. But I don't think that just any old Brexit will do for the electorate. I think they'd prefer to see either a Brexit which means a clean break outside the customs union and single market, or a second referendum as part of Brexit policy so that they could voice their opinion to remain and therefore not threaten the economy by leaving the customs union and single market. But it depends on which area of the country you come from and whether you voted to remain or leave back in 2016. Remember I did a video a few weeks back about the Newport by-election. Remember, Labour lost 12.7% of the vote share. So we've actually seen an improvement from Labour since Newport and failure since UKIP. But what I wanted to remind you of was in that Newport election, we had Plaid, we had the Lib Dems, and we had the Greens all splitting out the Remain vote. So even though in the local elections we saw a huge jump towards the Lib Dems and the Greens, the Lib Dems and the Greens were the only Remain options on that ballot paper. So even though it seems like the Lib Dems can gain massively from Remain, they will struggle in a general election, or indeed in a European election, when Change UK and other Remain parties are on the ballot paper, because it spreads out that vote. So this is the projected vote share, which we're going to base our map prediction on when we come to later. It predicted that the Conservatives have 28%, Labour neck and neck on 28%, the Lib Dems on 19%, and other parties will be on 25%. So in other words, we'd end up with some form of hung parliament. We'll take a look at what that means for particular areas of the country later. As for now, I wanted to take a look in the local elections by region, and you can see a clear trend, particularly in the southeast, the southwest, the east, and the East Midlands and the West Midlands. As the Conservatives lose, the Liberal Democrats gain. However, it's a very different picture as you go further up north. It's not necessarily a Liberal Democrat gain. Why? Well, I think it's because up north, people are more in favour of leaving the EU, and therefore they're less inclined to vote in favour of the Liberal Democrats. So let's take this vote share, 28, 28, 19, and other on 25, and spread it out in a map across the country. So I wanted to, first of all, split this other vote out so that UKIP gained, let's say, half of that, so 12.25% of that. And let's assume that UKIP and the Brexit Party will equally share out half each, so 6.125% each. But my map only includes UKIP, so let's just assume that UKIP includes both UKIP and the Brexit Party. And we'll see what that change means for the country. So first of all, let's take the Conservative vote share down to 28%. And you see that Orchard and South Perthshire has gone. Morecambe and Loosedale has gone. So as you see, I'm going to take it down quite a way. And you'll see Corby go to Labour, Scarborough and Whitby go. You see they're gaining quite a lot of areas in the north. They're gaining a lot of West Scotland as well, Western Bartonshire. And it's giving Labour a bigger and bigger and bigger majority. But let's do the same to Labour. Take them down. Take that majority down. Let's just go into sensible areas. And they've lost Elmet and Wathwell. They've lost Berwick-upon-Tweed. They've lost South Cambridgeshire to the Lib Dems. That wouldn't surprise me, actually, given that Cambridgeshire was the most Remain in the Revoke Article 50 map. East Lothian has gone to the SNP. And we can see Plaid and other parties gaining back Wales. And then that shows that we would have a hung parliament short by 73, with Labour projected to have the most seats. But let's also change the Lib Dem vote share to 19, and let's split out Other and UKIP to 12.25% each. So let's take this down to 19, and you can see that Inverness has gone to the SNP, West Aberdeenshire and Kincard has gone to the Conservative. So we still have a hung parliament, with Labour holding the most seats, the Lib Dems holding 56 seats and 72 other seats being held. Let's increase the UKIP vote share, assuming that it's both a combined UKIP and Brexit Party vote share, to 12. And even though we gained a seat in Thurrock, we do not see a massive amount of change in regards to the country. And let's just add 12% to other, assuming it's Green, the Plaid, or the SNP. Those other parties that also remain generally throughout the country. Labour are short by 51 as of right now. Lancaster and Fleetwood has gone to Labour. See, as I'm taking this up, it's taking the Tory vote share down. Chesterfield has gone to Labour. And it's taking the Labour hung parliament, the amount that they're short by, down actually, as this other category goes up, which is good for Labour. But it still means that they're likely to have to form a coalition. And there we go. It's taken the Conservative vote share down to 20 just to equalise it out. But Labour would still be short by 29 MPs, which means that they would have to go into coalition with probably most likely the SNP, because the Lib Dems would not likely go into coalition after their coalition last time with the Conservatives, which didn't turn out too well. So that's the future map of the country. And as you can see, the Labour areas will always remain Labour areas, the Tory areas will always remain Tory areas. But we're seeing something very different in the Lib Dems gaining huge majorities of Cornwall. Wales is very different to England, and Scotland is going to become very SNP biased, and that's probably going to lead to some kind of Scottish independence referendum, or at least a second referendum on our membership of the European Union. What the local elections didn't reflect was the vote share towards the Brexit Party and Change UK. What I think Change UK will do is break up that Remain vote even more, spreading the Remain voters out to more parties and not helping the Remain argument of people who want that second referendum, because there will be more of a vote share spread, but there will be, because of our first past the post system, there will be less MPs in favour of that second referendum than there could have been if more voters turned towards, say, one party like the Liberal Democrats. As for this UKIP Brexit Party battle, it could have a similar effect. However, I think the Brexit Party is a lot more popular than people assume. I do worry that the Brexit Party and UKIP combined will not have enough seats in each European seat to contest properly the election, but I do feel that the two main parties in particular are losing out to these third, fourth, fifth, sixth parties, and that's likely to create a hung parliament and very divided, split politics in the future, where parties are going to have to find a coalition or consensus on their way forward with each other in order to get over this Brexit hurdle, in order to focus on the other issues such as Greenbelt land and council tax and those other issues I've been talking about that sort of played into this election but didn't really, because Brexit is such a major hurdle to get over for these parties. But they're just some of my thoughts on this issue. I want to know some of your opinions in the comments below. Join in the debate below, and as always, subscribe.